Not knowing why we were there, the confusion was even more distressing. But when we had originally set up in Bastogne, there was a hill somewhat to the east of the town. And on top of that hill, we set our radar. Now, the radar was highly secret. In fact, in England, when it was given to us, we were told that the whole thing is secret and we'd be punished if we let any information about it get around. And there we were, the company in Bastogne, the radar on top of a hill a few miles east of Bastogne, and Germans advancing very rapidly, and no one apparently in a state of knowledge as to what was going on or what should be done. Well, I called into play my Marine background, made a quick evaluation of the system, and told our commanding officer that what we should do is turn ourselves over to the highest ranking infantryman or paratrooper and operate as a part of the defense of the town. And he said, "You're crazy." And I said, "Well, I have a feeling for what's going on. I think Bastogne is going to become more important. I think they need men. And here we're doing nothing. Why don't we volunteer to get into this?" He said, "Bosworth, what's the matter with you? Have you got a girlfriend in Bastogne? Why are you so eager to stay?" I said, "You know I don't have girlfriends. And the reason I have to stay is purely military. We are at a crossroads. All the roads converge on Bastogne, and they lead to the Meuse River. The Meuse is the primary objective of this counterattack. The Germans want to get across the Meuse because on the other side, they can isolate our main source of supply, and they can separate the British and the Americans, the main source being Antwerp, of course. And they felt that if they could do this, we'd give up again. We'd lose the war. And so the whole counteroffensive was aimed at getting across the Meuse, and the best way to do that would be by taking Bastogne and moving on from there to the various bridgeheads that crossed the river. Well, he thought I was insane, and he said there's no way he's going to just stay there and go into someone else's command. I said, at least what we ought to do is guard the van up there. We either can leave with everybody else, or we can stay and guard the van and use it if possible. Or if you can't do that, I'll stay with the van until we know what's going on and what should happen. And if the Germans overrun that position, then I'll blow up the van. And if not, then I'll preserve it until you get back to it. Well, he resented it, but he couldn't overcome the logic, and he knew he had no idea of anything else to do. So I took a friend, and we drove up to the base of this hill, and we lay down there and spent the night watching the van from a sloping segment. See, here's the hill, the radar's on top of it. Then there's a long meadow running down. Then there's the road. Along this road are coming all the retreating tanks and infantry and vehicles. And then there's another sloping portion of about 7 or 8 feet that led to the meadows, the field. And I picked that slope to stay with. We could have stayed up with the van, but I figured our actions would be restricted. No point staying on the slope. The ideal place seemed to be to lie there at the base of the road where we might control whatever was coming, or might cross the road, climb the hill, and blow the van. And so we stayed there. Now that's the closest I've ever come to killing a German. What happened was, it was very foggy. You couldn't see more than 50 yards, I'd guess, at most. And as we lay here, there's a forest, little woods adjoining our position. So we lay there for several hours. The last of the American vehicles passed us going into Bastogne, and now we were only listening for the sound of the German tank tracks. As we lay there on this diagonal, I sensed more than saw a figure emerging from the forest alongside us. And I knew immediately it was a German scout. What I didn't know was whether it was one man patrolling or whether he was the point man for a large group. And so I quickly put my hand over the mouth of my buddy, who was lying alongside me, and cautioned him not to say anything. And as this German soldier with his rifle passed maybe 25 feet at most from us, I let him go. Had I fired on him, he might have been the leader of a group. They would have killed us. We were in a perfectly vulnerable position, and they would have captured the van. So I made the decision to let him go by and continue to guard the van. As it turned out, he never came back, so he must have scouted out the position and then returned to the German lines in some other route. After we got back to Bastogne, the whole group massed and left on the westbound road. We'd gotten only a few miles out of town when it was realized that a couple of our men were not with us. And I volunteered to go back into Bastogne and find them. Now, as I mentioned, every time I went into Bastogne, Mickey came back with me when I left. This time when we left Bastogne, he did not come back. And he was there while the town was being shelled. Now, we'd been close to shell fire before, but this time it was really horrendous. Well, as I went back into town with his Jeep and a driver to pick up the two men, I stopped the Jeep at the head of the main town, and some furry beast came dashing down the street at a speed I couldn't imagine. From 20 feet away, he launched himself, threw himself into my arms, and shivered away. Mickey had decided his best protection was with me. And that's how we were reunited in Bastogne.